This conference will now be recorded.
Okay.
This conference will now be recorded.
Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today to explore more about expedition cruising and more specifically, the seventh continent of Antarctica. I'd like to take an opportunity to introduce myself. My name is Melissa Meredith Fail. I'm the lead travel advisor and agency owner of RLX Travel Group. We are based here in Silversea, Arkansas, and would love to help you for future travel if you ever think that that's going to happen again. And it will, believe me, it's going to happen before you know it. Well, even though people are not traveling today due to the coronavirus, it doesn't mean that their minds are lying in dormant. Oh, not by any means at all. I'm still receiving emails and asking me every day about future travel to off the beaten path destinations. And you know what? There's lots of them that they ask me about. But specifically, Antarctica is one of those bucket list places that pops up every day. And another question that often hits my inbox is specifically about expedition cruising. People just don't know what expedition cruising really means. They've been cruising for years, and you mentioned the word expedition cruising, and the first thing they think is it's going to take lots of activity and cause lots of stress. And honestly, people, I want you to know you'll love it. So with that in mind, I put on my thinking cap to see how I could share more information with you about expedition cruising and Antarctica. And I came up with an idea, and I think it's a perfect idea. It's essentially a destination dive presentation. And since most people don't know much about expedition cruising or Antarctica, and Googling it doesn't always yield accurate info, I decided I needed the perfect co-host to share her experience with me. So I would like to introduce you to Miss Rachel Woodward. And Rachel is the Senior Director of Expedition Sales at Silversea Cruises. And more importantly, she visited Antarctica with her mom, and she's going to share about this amazing destination and her experience. Rachel, thanks for sharing with us today, and welcome.
Well, thank you, Melissa. Really excited to co-host this Expedition Antarctica webinar. And I would like to say, while we cannot travel right now, and time is something many of us have more of lately, it really makes it a great time to sit back, relax, and let our minds wander free and review one of the most breathtaking places on the planet, Antarctica. This photo, I visited Antarctica 2 years ago with my mother, and this was one of our first landings. And, you know, it's a memory I will treasure forever, as well as my mother. So I look forward to sharing with you all some of my experiences from my trip. I do want to give a little overview of expedition destinations that Silversea Expeditions visits. Over 570 worldwide destinations. So from Antarctica up to the Arctic, we also visit really remote places such as the Kimberleys in Australia, Papua New Guinea, the Cook Islands, Russian Far East, Sumatra. And these destinations, the only way you can visit them is on a small expedition ship and being on Zodiacs. So one of the questions we get a lot too is the type of activity levels. Some people think that expedition cruising, you know, you have to be really active. You have to want to go on 8-mile hikes a day. Well, that isn't the case. We cater to all different activity levels. Usually there are 2 landings a day, one in the morning and then one in the afternoon. We might offer a short walk, or we might offer, I would say a walk might be an hour, hour and a half in length, or a Zodiac cruise. And that's the other great thing. Zodiac cruising is offered every day. So even if you don't want to go ashore, you can just be on the Zodiac. We'll offer bird walks, and then also we use the vessel to explore. So you can see in this photo here, guests are on the bow of the ship, and this photo was in the Arctic. So we cater to all different activity levels. I like to say if you can play around a golf, climb a flight of stairs, you can go on an expedition voyage. I want to click through some photos here just to give you an idea of the places we visit. But this is typically how we get our guests ashore. So we have small expedition vessels, and then from there, you'll get on a Zodiac with an expedition guide. Usually about 10 to 12 guests in a Zodiac. But some of these destinations we visit, the Darien Gap in Panama, you can see kayak here in the Arctic, as well as visiting a remote beach in Iceland. The only way you can visit this beach is on a Zodiac. Another popular destination, the Kimberleys in Australia. This photo here was seeing the tidal change at Montgomery Reef at 6 in the morning. And then this is a photo from my trip last summer. I visited the Arctic, this area called Bear Island, not hundreds, but thousands of puffins. So expedition cruising really combines the wildlife you'll see, the cultural experiences. This particular photo here, this is in the Russian Far East, meeting with a tribe going ashore here. They're showing us how they cook their salmon. And then it is as active as you want the trip to be. But it is a really popular way right now to travel. The expedition market is booming. So I won't share too many details about Silversea Expeditions because we want to talk about Antarctica today, but I do have this slide that just gives an overview of the vessels in our fleet. We do have 4 ships. We do have a brand new Galapagos ship coming out this July, and then we're converting our Silver Wind expedition ship later this year. So we have 3 polar vessels that will take guests to Antarctica. So with that, we will jump right in. Why should you visit Antarctica? Well, of course, you want to check off that bucket list to visit the 7th continent, but Antarctica is a frozen continent surrounded by oceans. I put together just some of my list of top reasons to visit Antarctica. Antarctica is an environment of beautiful isolation. It combines wildlife, the history, and the landscape. Only 50,000 people visit Antarctica each year. So also combining that with the adventure side, it can be as adventurous as you want. Imagine being on Zodiacs, walking ashore, hiking, kayaking as well. The icebergs, that is something that I was really blown away by. I knew with Antarctica I would see penguins each day, but this particular photo here was taken on my trip. The color of the icebergs, from the turquoise, the teals, the icebergs, 80% of them are below the surface level. And if you are an avid photographer, I recommend Antarctica. We do have a photography team on board, but whether or not you're using a really fancy camera or just taking photos on your iPhone, you're within a couple feet of the penguins. So that really is unique there because the wildlife, it's uninhabited. So the penguins, they have no fear of humans at all. And the other thing I like to talk about, top reasons to visit Antarctica, with expedition cruising, it is very different than a classic cruise, but we have an expedition team on board, up to 28 guides, and they're all specialists in their field. So every day you're on a Zodiac cruise, you're with a different guide, hiking and walking, anywhere from marine biologists, historians, botanists, and you always have an expedition leader. So they really do make the difference visiting these remote destinations. But some of the wildlife that you'll see visiting Antarctica, the penguins. So if you're on a 10-day voyage, you'll see 3 penguin species, Gentoo, chinstrap, Adelie. If you're on an 18-day voyage, you'll see up to 7 penguin species. Whales as well, you'll see humpback whales, minke whales, fin whales, and then any clients that are avid birders, this is a great trip for birding as well. So what I would like to do is just give a little overview of a typical day in the life for an Antarctica voyage. One of the questions, and Melissa and I were reviewing this, of how you get to Antarctica. We make it seamless. So if you're flying from the U.S., we will include an overnight hotel in Santiago. The following day, we'll have a charter flight to Ushuaia. So all of the Antarctica voyages are round-trip Ushuaia. You can either select a 10-day voyage or an 18-day voyage. The 10-day voyage will visit the Antarctic Peninsula, where the 18-day voyage will visit the Falkland Islands and South Georgia. So with that, you'll see the 7 penguin species. So it just depends how much time you have, but I do highly recommend, if you can, to do the 18-day voyage. And we're in Antarctica during their summer. So that's mid-November until the beginning of March, which is a prime time to see all of the wildlife there. So we'll click through here. And these are some photos from my trip, and some of our expedition photographers shared this past season. But we make it quite easy. Usually the landings are early in the morning, and you'll get on these Zodiacs. Small groups, no more than 10 to 12 guests in a Zodiac. And you can see your first landing in Antarctica, not just hundreds, but thousands of penguins. So this is every day in Antarctica. You're within a couple feet of penguins. But I do want to talk a bit about, if you're on the 18-day voyage, another area that you visit will be the Falkland Islands. And it's really interesting here with the bird cliffs. It's very rocky. So you'll see rockhopper penguins, and then you'll also observe black-brown albatross. So you can see a couple guests here photographing the albatross. Another area that we visit, which is the highlight of Antarctica, is South Georgia. So South Georgia is where you will see the king penguins. And if you can see here in this photo, I mean, not just hundreds, but thousands of king penguins on a landing site. Watching ashore, you're within a couple feet. You can see guests in their parkas. We do include expedition parkas on every polar trip. And then when you get off a Zodiac, you're in about calf deep of water. So every day, you will have a wet landing. We do have a mudroom on board where you can store the boots, but you'll get off that Zodiac in about calf deep of water, walk ashore, and be around hundreds, if not thousands of king penguins. This particular photo here, you can see guests taking photos of elephant seals. Some guests will have their iPhones, and there'll be a couple other guests that have large cameras, but you're so close to the wildlife. You really do get some amazing photographs. This particular image here, you can see thousands of king penguins, but here, I mean, 60,000 king penguins you can see. And this was likely in early January. You can see some of the baby king penguins in their brown fur here. But it is quite remarkable to visit South Georgia. I do want to talk a bit about the penguin species that you will see. So I mentioned on a 10-day or an 18-day voyage, the penguin species you'll see anywhere from Gen 2 rockhopper and chinstrap penguins. One of my favorites, of course, the Gen 2 penguins. You will see baby penguins, and they're born towards the end of December. So January and early February is a perfect time to see baby penguins. Now, as our season is mid-November until early March, you tend to get more snow and ice mid-November into early December. So it's a little bit more pristine. But if you do want to see baby penguins, I recommend taking a look at itineraries end of December and into January. So with the Antarctic Peninsula, and this will be a typical like 10-day voyage if you're visiting the Antarctic Peninsula, and we combine that with the 18 days. But I'll run through just some areas that you'll visit on a 10-day voyage as well. So you'll have these wonderful experiences, Zodiac cruising each day, Paradise Cove. And another question Melissa and I tend to get a lot is the weather temperature in Antarctica. What is it like? I would say it's probably colder in Chicago than it is in Antarctica right now. You do wear a lot of base layers, so that really helps. But for most days, I would say it might be anywhere from 20 degrees to 40 degrees. The sun tends to be out. But Zodiac cruising is another great way to see the wildlife. And one of my favorite places exploring, Silversea Cove. So this was a photo from my trip 2 years ago. How close you get to these icebergs. You feel very small being on a Zodiac, seeing how large these icebergs are. But we had 8 humpback whales bubble feeding near our Zodiacs for about an hour and a half. It was amazing, literally within a couple feet of our Zodiac. So these are the experiences you get in Antarctica. Every day is different. If you speak with a guest that visited Antarctica last year, it will be a different story compared to maybe what someone saw on their voyage. So it really is unique. Zodiac cruising, going ashore, the other activities will offer anywhere from walking ashore, or if you want to stretch your legs a bit more, hiking. So usually I would say on a 10-day voyage, we might offer 3 or 4 opportunities to hike. But if you don't want to hike, you can always do a shorter walk. So this is a photo from my trip here, visiting Danko Island, which is a great area to see Gen 2 penguins. You'll see 2,000 pairs, and it's a breeding area. So if you see in the bottom photo, that brown area, there's Gen 2 penguins there. If you just want to do the walk, you could walk there. And then if you want to stretch your legs a bit, you can walk to the top of Danko Island, which just has beautiful views. Another area, Neko Harbour, another area where you'll see Gen 2 penguins, and it has this hike to a lookout point where it just has stunning panoramic views of a glacier. I was mentioning the expedition team, and having a large team, always small groups ashore, they lead all the hikes, the walks. For my trip, I became friends with our ornithologist, Will. He's photographed here in that photo here. And you can see chin-strap penguins all around. So it really is interesting landing sites and interacting with the expedition team. They really do share a lot when it comes to the wildlife and what you're observing each day. But they always lead all of the hikes as well as the walks. So you're always in small groups. It's not an area that you can explore on your own. But one of my favorite things to do is Zodiac cruising. So in addition to seeing humpback whales, you'll see fur seals. You'll also see leopard seals. And visiting Hope Bay, you can see in the background Adelie penguins. Over 120,000 pairs can be found at Hope Bay. So when we talk about the masses of penguins you see each day landing, it's not just hundreds, it's thousands of penguins. Melissa and I were talking about some of the highlights from my trip, and it wasn't just the penguins. I knew I'd see a lot of penguins, but it was the colors of the icebergs. This photo here, you can see the turquoise, the teal. 85% of the icebergs are below the surface, but every day you're going to see stunning icebergs. Zodiac cruising as well as just being on the vessel. And for guests that are a little bit more active, we do offer kayaking. This is another great way to see the wildlife. Paradise Bay. It's named Paradise Bay because of the spectacular scenery of the mountains, the glaciers, and the icebergs. So just really stunning photos here, but kayaking is included on the trip. And it's great for guests that just want to be a little bit more active. Cooperville Island, you'll see here with Gen 2 penguins, a great area to explore that. And then Petermann Island is another area where you can walk around, see penguins. But one of my highlights too is visiting Deception Island at Whalers Bay. So guests will be able to walk around with the geologists, and they can talk about the history here with whale and oil. And Port Lockroy, if you want to send a postcard back home, this is an area where you can do that. You can also get your passport stamped here at Port Lockroy. No human civilization in Antarctica other than scientific research centers. So that's the only time that you'll see other civilizations is just when you visit some of these scientific research centers. So I would like to end this with talking about some of the wildlife that you can observe from just the comforts of the vessel. So you can see here, guests are out on deck with the expedition team exploring. You'll see humpback whales as well as orcas. And then I always say, pack your bathing suit to participate in the polar plunge. Some guests might think, oh my goodness, the water temperature, yes, it is quite cold, but I had over 50 guests signed up for the polar plunge on my Antarctica trip. So it's something that you got to do. It's a bucket list thing to do. You do get a little certificate that says you participated in it, and it does make it fun. Guests are out on deck cheering you on and taking photos. So Melissa, I know that you might have some questions here. I want to turn it over to you and just thank you. Hopefully this sparks some interest with a destination that is close to my heart, one of my favorite places that I've ever traveled to, visiting Antarctica. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Rachel. I may still be muted.
I can hear you. You're great.
Oh, okay. All right. Thanks. So I do have some questions if you have a couple moments that I would see if you have some answers for. First of all, I was looking through those glacier photos as you were talking, and it amazes me how the different colors really show up. And so I guess from someone who's not been there, and I'm so used to seeing everything photoshopped, are those colors really that blue and white? I mean, is it that amazing when you stand in front of it?
Yes, it is. Every day it's like that. I mean, it's the most pristine place in the world. With some of the ice arches, 80% are below the surface. The glaciers are formed from compacted snow. So you're going to see these icebergs. They have chunks of just floating ice. So a lot of times just Zodiac cruising, you're going to be next to some icebergs. They might be a fourth of a mile in length. Even going through the Leopard Channel, you're going to see stunning views of icebergs. So it is that beautiful and different colors of blue. That's really what amazed me.
Yeah, they're just stunning photos. Well, so then I'm guessing that the ship has been specially built to sail those type of waters. Is it like an icebreaker ship so that it has an reinforced hull? How does that work?
Great question. So it does have our vessels have ice strengthened hulls. So they're not icebreaker ships. With icebreaker ships, they do not have stabilizers. So that's one thing. They're ice strengthened hulls, which does make it quite, I would say, comfortable crossing the Drake Passage, having those stabilizers on there. But we are able to navigate and break through the ice with our ice strengthened hulls.
Okay, and I'm so glad you mentioned Drake's Passage, because that was my next question. I know that for folks that have maybe looked into Antarctica in the past, they know about Drake's Passage, but not really what to expect. It's when they go through there. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Sure. For the most part, it's usually the Drake Lake. 8 out of 10 times, it's going to be really smooth. But there can be, 1 out of 10 times where you might feel a little bit of rough seas. I always say wear the patch just in case. Our expedition team, as well as captain, tries to make it as comfortable as possible. On my trip, leaving Ushuaia, they were able to look at the weather forecast and they said, you know what, let's delay leaving until the next morning. We delayed leaving until the following morning, and it was quite comfortable crossing the Drake Passage. Once you get to the peninsula, there's you don't have to worry about any type of movement. So I just took off the patch. But if you are concerned with that, I can share some images of the Drake Passage. But for the most part, it is quite comfortable.
Okay. All right. Well, so thinking about activities, you mentioned this, and I thought maybe this might be something of interest to our viewers. So since the Zodiac landings typically only take up approximately 4 hours a day, you'll have the morning landing in the afternoon if the weather permits. What other things on the ship are available for them to do?
Great question.
I know they'll be watching wildlife, but I know there's got to be other things that are there that are going to help them learn more about the location.
Oh, yes. Well, we'll have every evening we have a daily activity sheet. So we'll review the type of activities that will take place. The landings usually happen earlier in the morning. I would say usually between 8 and 10 in the morning you go ashore. And then when you come back on board, there's usually a lecture before lunch. So our expedition team, they're not just hosting ashore, but it's on board. So daily lectures that they could be lecturing on marine biology, baby penguins, humpback whales. What's the best time to see humpback whales? They might talk about the ice arches and the formations. So lectures, that's one thing, but there's plenty of time to relax as well. So we will have some games on board for guests to play. Even in their suites, it is quite comfortable. We have movies that guests can watch, but a lot of times you do spend time with the expedition team on board. You're out on deck looking for wildlife. We have plenty of public spaces to view wildlife as well.
Yeah, I would think that would be really important when looking at ships. If you ever think that, you might want to go, wanting to look and make sure the ship provides plenty of public space so you can get the perfect picture and you're not trying to shoot a photo around someone's head. You want to make sure that the ship is able to accommodate it. And I do know that Silversea puts a lot of thought into the ships and the way that they have them built, and the rooms are amazing. But I thought that was interesting, just looking through the pictures when you and I were prepping for this, that there's the point of the ship is perfectly capable of holding passengers, so you can get out there and really lean over and take the picture of the humpback whale, see what you want to see, and yet you're not really that far from going back to your room or going to the lecture hall, because the ships are not so large that you have to worry about hiking it back. It's a smaller intimate ship, and so the vessels are very, very small. And I always say, if you're looking at a destination like Antarctica, look at a vessel under I would say 270 passengers. The reason I say that is because the amount of time you'll be ashore. With Antarctica, you can only have 100 guests ashore at once. So we rotate people in groups. But if you're on a vessel over 500 passengers, you probably will only have one landing a day, and it's just how they rotate guests. So I say it's always better to look at smaller vessels, and that's something with Silversea. Our vessels to Antarctica range from 140 guests to 240 guests. So we can get guests off the ship quite easily. And the other thing, too, I always say is to look at the number of guides to the number of guests. We have 28 guides for 240 guests. That averages to about 8 to 10 guests in one Zodiac. The Zodiacs can accommodate 16 guests. So when you're talking about taking photographs on a Zodiac, that particular day in Silversea Cove, I had 5 guests in our Zodiac. So I was able to move from side to side taking photos of the humpback whale. Oh, that's awesome.
That's something that you might not think of, but I find it really important to look at the number of guides. They really do make the difference when it comes to a trip like this.
Yeah. Well, just kind of switching lanes from Antarctica, but just over to expedition cruising in general. Is that something like to differentiate between typical ocean cruising over to expedition cruising? Is the one big feature typically the Zodiac and being able to travel on the smaller ships, get more up close and personal to the destination? Would that be something you identify with expedition cruising?
Yes.
Okay.
That is the biggest difference when it comes to expedition cruising. It's not just the size of the ships are, half the size, but it is having the expedition team on board. And with the Zodiacs, we're able to use these Zodiacs to take you to places you cannot access on a cruise ship. The only way is if you take the Zodiacs and you go a mile, and then you're able to visit this area in the Russian Far East, or cruise around that photo I shared in the Arctic of Bear Island and seeing those bird cliffs. So with expedition cruising, it's all about getting guests off the ship in those Zodiacs to explore.
Oh, that's just amazing. Okay, well, you know what? I don't have any more questions on my list. But I do want to say thank you so much to you for sharing your experience and your expertise in expedition cruising, and specifically about Antarctica. And I'd love to thank you, all our guests today, for hanging on there with us and learning more about our destination dive into Antarctica and expedition cruising. And we look forward to seeing you all soon, hopefully with another destination dive. I've yet to select the location yet, so if you have some input and you have something special you'd like to know more about, shoot me over an email. My contact information is there on the screen. You can reach me. Email is probably the best way. But also, I'm still here in the office every day. Give me a call and let me know what you'd like to learn more about. And I'll be happy to hop on a presentation and teach you more about whatever destination is on your bucket list. Everyone, have a blessed afternoon, and thank you so much for visiting with us.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.